โมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings. Here in Melbourne, we've just come out of the strictest part of the lockdown we've been having recently. So we have more people coming back to the monastery. Excuse me. One of the things people have been talking about is their own frustrations in themselves, particularly aversion for themselves and life, and also the general level of discontent in society, say in the workplace. When people come together, there's a lot of negativity, complaining, dissent, people speaking back to each other, losing their temper, becoming irritated, and so on. I think that's not surprising with endless lockdowns and the extra burdens of dealing with the pandemic and rules and regulations and things not always going in the way we want. So that's all the more reason for us to keep practicing metta. This quality the Buddha emphasized as a basis for our life as human beings. The quality of kindness, goodwill, loving kindness. It's a quality, as I said, a base quality we have to keep coming back to in our practice and on every level, body, speech and mind. Just now we were doing a brief meditation on using the object of metta on the theme of developing loving kindness for ourselves, loving kindness for others. This sometimes brings up problems because some people feel they can't have a good feeling for themselves. They can't wish themselves well. Some people feel they don't deserve it, they're not good enough, or they've just got into the habit of being quite negative about themselves, maybe because of events in their life, things not going well, having painful memories and so on. And so people have a doubt, why do we practice metta for ourselves? Well, one reason is because it's very difficult to have true goodwill, kindness for others if we can't have it for ourselves first. Because it's a positive emotion, so it's not just a thought, it's a feeling. And if that feeling has a sort of gap in it because you're holding on to negativity towards yourself and just angry thoughts, well then it's going to have that same gap coming up as you try to develop for others. And it's not impossible to develop metta for others before yourself. It's not the usual way of doing it, but sometimes if you are really full of self-loathing, which we do get into that mood sometimes, then, well, it is one way you can start developing the thought of metta, is think of others first, wishing them well, and then gradually bring your mind, your attention back to yourself. But it's an important point in our life, whether we're a meditator or not, you have to start valuing your own humanity, your own human worth. If you really want to progress and improve your life and find happiness, you have to see the value of it, just as we have to see the value of others. So this word metta, loving kindness, the Buddha encouraged us to develop it in a way that's universal. We call it the universal loving kindness. So our aim is to get to the point where we can have goodwill for ourselves and others equally, without distinction. And that doesn't mean to say we are approving of other people if they're doing bad things, or that we'll like everyone in the world, but what we're doing is developing our own heart and this quality in our own heart, and it's developed in a way that's without distinction, without choosing between beings, who you like, who you don't. This is why, when developed well, it gets to the point where you can develop as a meditation to the point of experiencing jhana, where the mind abandons all the hindrances and becomes one-pointed, fixed or absorbed into the thought of goodwill directed to oneself and others equally. They call it, metta is called Brahma Vihara. So Brahma refers to the Brahma gods, people who have developed deep states of samadhi, and when they die they're reborn in the Brahma realms. And Vihara means dwelling place. So it's the dwelling place or the abode of Brahma gods. And so the Buddha's encouragement was for us to develop it as a meditation, but as a thought, as a wholesome or skillful mind state that we dwell in more and more. And so you have to get used to it in order to dwell in it. It's a bit like, say you move into a new house, which is a dwelling place, and you don't know all the rooms and what's in there yet. The very first day you're walking around getting lost, tripping over things maybe because you're not used to that place. So it takes a while for you to settle in, get used to it, and then one day you realize, oh, I know my house, I know where everything is, and you're no longer getting lost or tripping over things. The practice of metta is something like that. It's something you have to really develop as an ongoing practice and become familiar with it to the point where you know how to dwell in it. It's a positive emotion, and it's a powerful positive emotion, similar to the other Brahma Viharas, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. But it's something we really have to learn to dwell in, to be with, at least for periods of time, to make it strong, to make it familiar to us so we can turn to it easily. And that's why it's a good meditation to do every day, as part of your practice. There are many meditation techniques the Buddha taught, and the Buddha we call a sapanyu, one who is all-knowing. And that's why he was such an excellent teacher. He would know people, their character, their personalities, their dispositions, and he would give teachings that were very suited to many different people, and he would choose what theme, what meditation object, what theme to give each person that he came across. Or occasionally he knew someone wasn't yet ready to be taught, and he would just wait and then just leave it or be silent. But he would know people's character very well. So there are many meditation objects we use, and not, whether it's the breath or the recollection of the Buddha or the contemplation of the body, or developing mindfulness based on the object of metta. But it's something that we all will develop as we develop whatever meditation technique we use. I know some monks who have made their main meditation object the practice of asubha kammatthana, focusing on the unattractiveness of the body. So focusing on the body, contemplating the 32 parts of the body, contemplating the 10 corpse reflections, so seeing their own body as a corpse or seeing other people's bodies as a corpse, which all sounds maybe a little bit gruesome or certainly challenging as meditation techniques. But when developed well, those meditation techniques bring the mind to a place of samadhi, one-pointedness, going beyond the 5 hindrances. And one of the 5 hindrances is ill will. So contemplation of the body or recollection of the Buddha or any other of these meditation techniques can get you to the point where your ill will subsides and your mind is peaceful, happy, one-pointed on its object. So the way to develop metta isn't solely by practicing metta bhavana either. That can be your main meditation object, but you can also develop metta developing any meditation object. Because one of the ways that the meditation affects the mind is you're training in mindfulness, bringing the mind to a place where mindfulness is more continuous, directed to an object. And so naturally you let go of your ill will. The more you do that, the more successfully you do that. So that's an interesting point, isn't it? When you're mindful, it's possible to be mindful of the breath or mindful of the Buddha and have metta. Anyone who develops any form of samadhi will naturally start to experience metta, goodwill. And you see that, people who have practiced, particularly develop deep states of samadhi, they tend to have a lot of metta. They're nice to be around, they're relaxed, they don't dwell in anger, they dwell in loving kindness, even though they may also be developing insight, developing vipassana as well. So any meditation ultimately brings you to abandon ill will, and one of the results of it is your experience of metta grows. It embellishes the thought of metta. We also practice metta on many levels. So metta in our actions. So our actions are founded in right view and in sila, in following the Buddhist path. So when you practice sila, say, for example, the 5 precepts, you're cultivating metta in the way you think, because you're abandoning the intention to hurt others physically or verbally, or to steal their things, take what things belong to them, take them away, or to damage their relationships through sexual misconduct. Keeping the 5 precepts naturally develops metta by developing a sensitivity towards others, even animals, learning to respect life, seeing the value of that in training ourselves and also developing good relations with the world around us. So skillful action encourages metta, encourages us to abandon thoughts of ill will or into the intention of ill will that leads us to harm others through our physical actions and then verbally as well. And when we practice right speech, we ground our right speech in different factors. So one is the quality of metta, goodwill for the one listening. And that's something to return to over and over again in our lives, how to bring up metta as we speak. And if you have goodwill for someone, it means you will have that sense of love towards them, appreciation, and be willing to listen to them, even if you disagree with what they say, you don't particularly like the person. If you ground your speech in metta, when you listen to them, there'll be a willingness to at least give them a chance, hear their view, rather than just say argue or dismiss them straight away. So metta is a quality that pervades the Buddhist practice, the Buddhist teachings, whether on the level of body, speech, or mind in meditation. We're constantly returning to it, either directly, by consciously and directly cultivating the thought of goodwill to oneself and others, or indirectly, as we abandon the hindrances, naturally metta arises. And so any meditation object you develop will gradually help you as a person bring up more goodwill, a good attitude, a skillful attitude towards yourself, even if it's a meditation that's not obviously associated with the thought of goodwill. So when you see it in this way, then that sense of the universality of metta starts to become clearer. The happy, healthy human mind, one of the factors of it is goodwill to oneself and others. So if goodwill is lacking, it's like we're in a state of ill health. Unfortunately, our ill health in terms of the mind can be quite damaging and long-term as well. It's interesting, the Buddha said you can get injured and you'll be healed sometimes quite quickly. Even if you have a broken leg, it might be a few weeks or a few months in a splint, and then your leg is recovered. Or you have a cut, and after a few days or a few weeks, it recovers. Physical injuries often heal quicker than mental injuries. You can be hurt by someone, and you remember that. If you're not very mindful, you remember that and hold on to the anger for weeks and months and years, maybe a whole lifetime even, and maybe even many lifetimes, like Devadatta holding on to his anger for the Buddha over lifetime after lifetime. So all the more reason to see the value of cultivating the thought of metta and the mental object, the skillful mental state of metta, goodwill, because it has a healing property, and some of the healing we need to do goes back a long way. Grudges, and animosity and resentment against other people can span, as I said, a whole lifetime. So it has a healing effect on the mind. It also has a healing effect on the body as well. When you practice a lot of metta meditation, you find this cool, peaceful energy that you're developing does seem to flow around the body, and sometimes it can even seem to soothe physical pain and help us cope with it better, tolerate it better. If you cultivate metta meditation, and the thought of metta is becoming established in your mind, then that naturally relaxes you. And then if you are experiencing physical pain or you have an illness, the mind is not reacting to that with aversion because you're cultivating metta. And sometimes that can have a physically healing quality to it, as well as mentally healing our anger and our negativity. And the Buddha pointed out, there's so many benefits from developing metta. It has, as well as a healing quality, it has a protective quality. He said if you develop metta well, then it protects you from arrows and poisons and fire and other dangers in life. And maybe there's not so many arrows and spears around these days, but there's enough bullets in the world, and certainly verbal bullets from other people. You think about it, when your metta is strong, if you've experienced a state of metta before, where your mind is calm and you're consciously developing goodwill for others, then even if they are angry towards you, saying hurtful things, behaving in an antisocial way, or threatening way, aggressive way, your mind itself maybe is not actually that hurt or traumatized or caught up in ill will at that time. It may still be an unpleasant situation, an unpleasant experience, but the mind itself seems protected, doesn't it? You seem to have a barrier when metta is present. Because once metta goes, then it's easy to fall into a reaction of anger and so on. But you notice when goodwill is established, then it's harder for people to hurt you, even when they're trying. Even applies to, just as it applies to people, it applies to animals as well. When you encounter barking, aggressive dogs or different animals, you notice when you're in a mood of metta, it doesn't seem to bother you too much, and you don't respond in a way that triggers or makes that barking dog or whatever it is worse. It tends to calm them down. So this quality of metta, it has many obvious advantages, many subtle hidden advantages as well, and it just pervades the whole of the Buddhist path. But it's not practiced in isolation. The Buddha encouraged us to practice in conjunction with wisdom, wise reflection in the first instance. And just to practice metta takes a bit of thought and contemplation, because how to apply metta in different situations. It's not always the same answer or the same way that it applies. The mood itself, the object metta, is always the same, one of goodwill, that you establish our mind in goodwill, but how we actually send that out into the world, say in the case of, say, with another person, sometimes goodwill, all it needs is just to smile or something, and that sends the right message to another person. Other times somebody may be doing something very destructive to themselves or others, and metta has to be translated into a lot of words or actions that maybe help that other person to calm down or stop them being self-destructive or whatever. So metta is displayed in many different ways on different levels of body, speech and mind, and guided with wisdom. As we know, practicing metta is not always easy. Sometimes it's a challenge. So you set out with a very good intention, and very quickly your metta crumbles or fades under the challenge of a difficult situation or a difficult person. And what do you do then? Well, you have to scramble back to find your metta. Maybe metta sometimes means having a rest, having a rest from the challenging person or the challenging situation. As you practice metta more regularly, you get to know yourself, the level of your mind, how much mental energy you have, how much physical energy you have. And in some situations, the right course of practice, the best solution is simply protect yourself and find some peace and quiet for yourself, and you have to leave other people sometimes when you yourself you've reached your limit. Say, particularly if you're in any kind of job that involves serving other people, or if you do volunteer work or do any kind of activities that involve dealing with other people, helping other people. One of the important lessons to learn is, how much energy do I have for other people? So you may have a basic intention of goodwill and wishing that onto other people, but then how much goodwill have you got before you run out and you become physically or mentally sick, or your anger takes over, say. That's something we have to learn. And so in some situations, metta for oneself means resting or taking oneself out of difficult situations until one has recovered one's energy. But not always. There are some situations you can't avoid, you can't get away from. So, say, like if you're a parent, you've got kids, and you have kids, that's a lifetime relationship, isn't it? And they're going to be with you maybe for at least 15, 20 years. There'll be times when you've lost your metta and you're exhausted, but because they're your kids, you can't maybe ignore the situation, and maybe you have to still do things for them and still relate to them. So there are times when you can't run away or can't get a rest, even if you want to. So then again, what do you do then? Well, you have to find skillful ways when you're exhausted to not give in to the destructive emotion of anger. And metta may be simply being very patient with yourself, with how you feel, being very tolerant of someone who is a very annoying or tiring, challenging person or challenging situation. Metta also practiced with wisdom, leads on to how do you respond to situations wisely. You can't always know ahead, can you? But if you practice metta and you're training yourself to reflect on things, then you're giving yourself the best preparation for all the challenges of life and the unexpected situations. And you don't necessarily have every answer to how to deal with every problem, every person, everything thing. But if you bring metta to the problem, in conjunction with some wise reflection and learning to use your intelligence to sort of consider things, understand things better, that's going in the right direction, isn't it? And you may not have all the answers, but you have the right qualities to find those answers in situations. Because what's the opposite? Well, the opposite is going to ill will. If you don't have goodwill, you go to ill will. When ill will takes over the mind, it's difficult to think straight, it's difficult to concentrate. The destructiveness of ill will comes into the mind, whether briefly or maybe in the more long-term way. And it leads to a bias in the mind. It skews our thinking. When you're caught into ill will, you only notice the bad things and what's wrong, so it gives you a kind of negative outlook on whatever situation or the person you're involved with, as opposed to goodwill, which brings you back to a more of a place of normality and just valuing your humanity and the humanity of that person. The practice of metta is not getting lost in positivity either, just developing a sort of positive view of the world and ignoring all that's wrong and everything that's some of the unskillful things people do. It's not to ignore that, but it's giving you the right quality to respond in a way that nourishes you and nourishes and develops good qualities in other people as well. Just like, say, going back to kids. If you've got kids, they can be very annoying, I'm sure. I'm speaking as a person without kids because I'm a monk, but if you have kids, there'll be times when they are very annoying, but if you meet their annoying behavior with anger, it's only going to make it worse, isn't it? And someone was here recently, they have a dog, and if you treat a dog with anger because it's annoying, because it doesn't do what you want or it's making a mess or whatever, that generally makes it worse, doesn't it? It makes it more fearful, and it often will take the anger you've passed on to it out on other dogs or even people, and be more prone to snap, whatever. So whether it's kids or animals, if we meet other people's behavior, which may be antisocial or unpleasant, but we meet it with anger, it tends to make the whole thing worse. If it is someone close to us and we get angry with them, well then later we also have the problem of feeling guilty or regret, and one thing leads to another. So the Buddha encouraged us to practice metta regularly, not only to heal ourselves and protect ourselves, but also as a preventative. It's like preventative medicine, you might say. We all many people are getting vaccinated against COVID now, preventative medicine. You have a little bit of COVID given to you with the vaccine, and you develop the antibodies, the immune system is boosted, and then hopefully in the future, if you get it or exposed to it, it won't kill you and it won't be so difficult. Well, metta is a bit like that. Metta is often prompted, our practice of metta is prompted by realizing there are challenges in life, there are annoying people, annoying situations, there are unpleasant things we have to experience in this world. There's pain of the body, pain of situations, other people's hurtful speech and so on. But then looking for a way to immunize your mind to the painful side of life by cultivating metta. So sometimes one way to develop metta is to look at where you're getting angry, but in a kind of a controlled way, when you're at peace on your own, and not in a confronting situation, but when you're quiet on your own, actually to bring up some of the things that bring up anger in you. Test yourself and explore, why do I get angry with this person or in that situation, with the idea of learning to bring up metta. So you're developing the positive attitude towards that situation, based on memories and what you think about a certain thing that brings up anger in a controlled way. So as part of your meditation on metta, using wise reflection, actually looking at your anger and understanding where is it coming from. what the Buddha called going back to the root. And it may be actually a lot of our anger comes from us not getting what we want, then we get angry. So it may be a person, we want them to be a certain way or do something that we want and they don't, so we get angry. So as you learn to reflect like this, pursuing metta but with wisdom, using your wise reflection, you may come to a conclusion, you realize, my anger is actually coming through my own frustration. Here is my own desire, frustrated desire, and I'm putting it onto that person. It doesn't mean to say there aren't situations where other people, are deliberately hurting us or causing us trouble. There are as well. But a lot of our anger is through our own frustrated desires coming up. With self-anger, it's like that, isn't it? Often, we have an idea of how we think life should be and what we want to be and where we want to be at in our life. And if we're not meeting that, not succeeding, then we turn back on ourselves, feel depressed, feel a failure, feel like the world is against us, etc., etc. The way ill will is, it sort of feeds one train of thought after another. But when you start to establish mindfulness, bring up the goodwill for yourself, a wish to improve, a wish to find out how to end this endless suffering, then the wise reflection is looking and it's saying, maybe actually the problem is my attachment to my ideals, or my judging myself against a set of ideals, or sometimes comparing to other people, and I'm actually making myself more miserable doing that, and you investigate it. So with metta, hand in hand with some wise reflection, you start to unravel where it's coming from, rather than just blaming yourself or getting stuck into the unhappiness of not getting what you want. You're actually trying to unravel where it's coming from. Another thing the Buddha said to do at that time, if you do have a lot of self-aversion, is try and look at the good in you, in your life, to counter the habit of always seeing what's wrong and what's negative, what's the failures and the mistakes. Because we all have a lot that we've achieved so far in our life. And this is something we overlook. And the Buddha talked over and over again about the value of being born as a human being. And this is where you get the advantage if you have this understanding of karma and rebirth, because this isn't the only life we live. We have past lives, future lives, and to be born as a human being is a very rare gift. Where did that gift come from? It came from yourself in a previous life, making enough good karma, including the practice of metta, for you to be reborn as a human this life. It's the fruits of your good karma. That's something to be grateful for and appreciate in your past self. Speaking on the conventional level, I know on the higher level there's no self, but conventionally we say there's a self, past life, who brought us to this life. That's something to be happy about, because once you're born as a human being, it opens up so many opportunities to learn and develop yourself in this path all the way to Nibbana. So it's a great, the Buddha even called it a lapa, it's a kind of wealth. To be born as a human being is you're rich. Even if you're born into poverty, which is not ideal, but you still have opportunities as a human being because you're intelligent, you can learn, you can change for the better, you can learn new things, you can go on to make more good karma. So we've all been born as a human being, so however bad things get, that's something you can come back to as a starting point for developing metta. And the same for other people. If you're looking at other people, they must have some good in them if they were born as a human being. And that's not to dismiss or overlook if they've done hurtful, bad things, destructive things. But to see we do have good in ourselves, other people have good in themselves. We've done good things since we were born, even if we feel our life is a failure and we're really down on ourselves. There are good things we can still see through that if we make the effort, you make the attempt to think it through, to recollect, remember past actions, past events. People have given us help and support. We've had parents, we've had people who've helped us since we were a kid. And that's something to be happy about and to find joy in, even if we've had failures and unpleasant things along the way. So the Buddha encouraged us to do this, to see the good in ourselves, see the good in others, even when things are looking very bad or when we meet with very unpleasant situations, as a way to overturn the habit of negativity. On the highest level, we are practicing metta and wisdom together, and we get to the point where we're developing it and then moving into vipassana, seeing the universal characteristics of impermanence and the selfless nature of phenomena. And that even applies to metta. So when you are looking at your life, a human life, or somebody else's, and one of the things you get familiar with, the more you reflect on this with mindfulness, is to see that mental states are one thing. Good mental states, wholesome mental states are one thing. Unwholesome mental states are another thing. But they are not the whole picture, are they? Like, we often judge a person by one deed, one thought, one action. If it's us, we're judging ourselves by our thoughts all the time. I have such terrible thoughts, therefore I'm a terrible person. Or if it's someone else, you may become aware of their thoughts through their speech, and particularly through their actions. So if somebody does something bad, we often stick that perception on them straight away, they're a bad person. But as you practice more vipassana and develop more insight, you're saying, well, people do bad things, and we can do bad things, and we can make mistakes, and we get caught into our negativity. But that isn't the whole picture, is it? We have mental states of negativity, and it moves on to speech and actions, but that isn't the person. People can do negative things, but it doesn't mean to say they are a negative person. There's no such thing as a negative person, because a person is a collection of physical and mental elements. So actually practicing vipassana, sort of analysing a person, whether it's yourself or others, into seeing the five khandhas, physicality, mental states, perceptions, feelings. One thing that it tends to bring up is compassion. Because when you do see somebody caught into anger, or when you see yourself caught into anger, you're seeing at that point that the mind is deluded, it's hurting itself, it's creating negative karma, it's maybe hurting other people, because anger is such a destructive thing. It's a bit like that disease again. When you've got COVID, when you see someone with COVID, or someone with COVID, generally it brings up compassion, because you feel for them, because they're suffering, if they've got a disease, any disease. In the same way, anger is like a disease, isn't it? It's not that person is a bad person because they've got COVID or because they've got anger. It's that person is afflicted by anger at that time, and it's leading them to make more negative karma, which is sad, because then they have to receive the fruits of that karma. If you're looking at it more clearly like that, with metta, with mindfulness, with wise reflection, instead of becoming more angry and more upset with that person, actually the correct result that arises is compassion and understanding. Particularly if you've seen it in your own experience, your own life, you're seeing when you are caught into anger, you're suffering, you are doing more destructive things, if only on the level of thinking, but also in speech and actions. You're like afflicted by that anger, it causes you suffering. Then you can understand when other people experience that same kind of mental state, they are also afflicted and suffering because of it. So you're actually seeing the universal experience of anger, just as we see the universal power and benefits of metta when we reflect in this way. So ultimately, no one owns metta, no one owns anger. These are mental states that come up in the minds of people, and the more you investigate it, observe it, you notice, well, metta is a better mind state to have. It brings you more happiness, it is more productive and leads on to many good things. It's like it nourishes the mind, whereas anger is destructive, as we know. One word said in anger can ruin a whole relationship, can ruin a job. You give into your anger at work, lose your temper, maybe you lose your job, or certainly it makes it harder to get on with other people or get ahead in that job. One word of anger in a relationship, husband and wife, partners, can destroy that relationship, or between parents and children, or friends, and so on. Your anger is so destructive. When you see that, although anger is an unpleasant thing to face and deal with, if you stop and consider it, it actually brings up compassion, because you can see, they're really hurting themselves with this anger, or I'm hurting myself with this anger. So compassion for oneself. And you start to see the real nature of anger as it's destructive. Whoever has it, in whichever mind, because it is impersonal, ultimately, anger is impersonal, whoever has it is suffering. Whoever's clinging and identifying with that anger is suffering. Whoever can abandon their anger is going to be happy, is going to be at peace. Therefore, it's worth abandoning. So as you practice vipassana and develop insight, you're going beyond just the sense of, this is an angry person, I hate them, or this is not an angry person, I like them, blah, blah, blah. You're actually just seeing more, analysing more the mental states of anger or metta, and seeing that they are impersonal, but you still know them, the value of them, or the destructive nature of them. So metta is to be practiced with wisdom. It goes better, it's more productive that way. Also, the development of wise reflection with metta helps to prevent us falling into some of the dangers of it. Attaching to metta. Another one that comes up all the time, people say, I practice metta and I have goodwill for people at work or my family or neighbours, but they don't return it. They don't give it back, they don't respond in the way I want, they're not grateful, they're not appreciative, they don't treat me well. Everyone has this problem, don't they? We fall into the expectation. It's not yet true metta. True metta is unconditional, without seeking anything in return. That's the quality of metta we're developing, particularly in meditation. You're not meditating, I have metta, may all beings be well, free from suffering, and may they do what I want, and may they be the way I like. That's not true metta. True metta is just sending out the goodwill to yourself, to others, and not wanting anything in return. So it's, tolerant and accepting people the way they are, even if they're not very nice. But what we tend to do is forget that, and we get caught back into creating a self in it. So it's, I am spreading metta, so I want something back. I want you to behave in the way I like, you to thank me or appreciate me or do what I want. And it doesn't always happen, because there's many causes and conditions that affect people. People have their different karma. And the truth is, sometimes you have metta for someone and they don't respond in any way at all. They continue to be difficult, aggressive sometimes, or don't care. It happens, and we have to accept people are different. So that doesn't mean to say give up on spreading metta. Metta is always a wholesome thought, will always lead to wholesome results. It's always good for the mind. But you have to balance it with some wisdom that understands you won't necessarily get an instant reaction, or that person you have metta for won't always behave well. It doesn't always work like that. There's different timings here. You spread metta, or you have metta, or you cultivate metta. That's good. It's good at the time, and it will also bring good results. But the person you may be having metta for may be on a different level, and you don't yet see the results with that person. Maybe for a whole lifetime. It's like a seed you're planting, and at some point it may produce results, but not necessarily when you want or how you want. So that's one reflection you have to bring up with the practice of metta. It doesn't always get you what you want, because it's not supposed to be developed in that way. It's a wholesome state of mind you develop, and then you let go. That's the vipassana part of metta, is letting go of the sense of self that may form around this metta that you're practicing and developing. So if you keep a sense of self, well, that will lead to expectations, desire, wanting some reward, some good result from your metta, and then leads to more suffering, more disappointment when it doesn't happen. So the Buddha encourages us to practice metta and then let go. Not to develop a conceit, I am one with metta, new self-view, I had less metta before, now I have more metta, I'm a better person. Or not to do it seeking rewards, seeking things in return from other people. Spread your metta so I can get this, get that. And you may get good rewards from practicing metta, of course. It's a very desirable quality, attractive quality, so it may make friends for you. Maybe it makes too many friends. That's another danger of metta. As you practice a lot of metta, maybe it attracts people to you and you spend a lot of time with other people and dealing with them. And there are limits to the practice of metta. So the Buddha encourages us to use wisdom as we practice it, to know the limits of it, to know the dangers. I guess the last main danger is that maybe you fall in love with someone by practicing metta. So they always say when you practice metta, don't spread thoughts of metta to people you might fall in love with, usually the opposite sex. So if you're a monk, you don't spread metta to women initially until you've done your vipassana, because you might fall in love with them, or they might fall in love with you. So that's a danger, isn't it? Or out in society, people do it. They're thinking of someone that maybe they're so bored, or they're so intent on that person, they just think, I'm going to keep sending my thoughts to them until they acknowledge me. And then they acknowledge, and you fall into the trap of thinking, they must like me because they've acknowledged me. Who knows? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe they look at you once and you think, they must love me. Well, that's all your imagination though, isn't it? So metta can lead you to fall in love with people. People can become attracted to you, and life can get more complicated, and in the long run leads to more suffering. So it's not to be practiced with attachment. We use wisdom and practice letting go, but you have to be aware of the dangers of it. And sometimes monks practice metta and they become very popular, and then they're sort of surrounded by people to the point they can't practice anymore and they end up disrobing. It's happened before. You might say it's from metta, but then the metta becomes like glue between people to the point where they can't contemplate anymore, no mindfulness, no wisdom, and the glue kind of pulls the mind down again. So metta is a practice to be cultivated through body, speech and mind, a wholesome quality, but to be balanced with wisdom, equanimity. And you see that someone who's practiced it well, say someone like Ajahn Chah or the Buddha or other enlightened teachers, it's not something that they get stuck on or attached to. It's a natural quality of the mind where metta is emanating from them. There's a good feeling because there's a lack of anger in them. But at the same time, it's not a deluded metta where they're just becoming attached to people or attracted to people or expecting things from people. It's just a natural quality they have, but it's always guided by wisdom. So tonight I've given you a few ideas, pointers on the subject of metta. It's both a meditation and it's a quality to develop in daily life through actions, through speech, and just it's an attitude to dwell in, to live with, to dwell in more and more, but to be guided by wisdom. So I'll leave the talk there.
sama